J.C. Sneed, nephew of Sam, had a cult following on the tour my rookie year, 1988. If you went to the range in the afternoon and J.C. was in the field, he likely had a handful of tour players behind him, watching him and oohing and awing at every shot he hit. And Mark Brooks, my roommate in college, and I are down at the far end. So we're down there hitting balls, and we have to walk back past this covey of players watching JC. And JC is challenging everybody in the crowd to give him a shot. You know, what do you want to see? You know, to Sluman or Billy Andrade or Davis Love or Brad Faxon or Willie Wood, whoever was there. You know, I want to see a low punch cut that takes off at that telephone pole off in the distance and cuts to this one. I want to see a high draw. I want to see you try to hit that pole down there. You know, one after another, everybody is just stupefied at how good he's hitting shots. So Mark and I fall in the back, and Mark smoking a cigarette at the time. We're sitting there watching, and everybody's got a shot, calling a shot. Finally, he's gone through everybody, and he points to Brooks, and he says, "What do you want to see, Mark?" And Mark takes a long drag of his cigarette. "I want to see you make a 5-footer."
Brandel Chamblee has made it where he's made it, in part because of his golf talent, but really because he has thought about the swing and what it takes to be successful in the game in a totally original way. This U.S. Open at Pinehurst is going to be especially exciting because we're going to see Brandel in another capacity, which is not just analyzing swings, not just analyzing statistics, but analyzing the character of the person, what it takes to win a U.S. Open. So we're thrilled to have him on the show. We got lucky with Brandel Chamblee because he was coming to Philadelphia, and there's a lot of U.S. Open history in Greater Philadelphia, so we had the idea that we'll show him around. There's a cemetery about 2 miles from my house called Ivy Hill Cemetery, and buried there is the great boxer Joe Frazier, the great tennis player Bill Tilden, and the great golfer, probably the most obscure of the three names I'm about to mention, Willie Anderson.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Look at that. 1910. Look at that.
If you talk to the ordinary golfer about Willie Anderson, it's a head scratcher. They never heard of the guy. It's understandable. He was at the prime of his game in 1910. But to Brandel Chamblee, this guy is alive. He won 4 U.S. Opens. He was born in North Berwick, Scotland, like a lot of the great golfers of that era were. He was part of that first wave of Scots that came to the United States, and they literally brought golf with them to the United States.
31 years, 4 days, Open National Champion. 1, 03, 04, 05. You know, it's amazing. Obviously, he didn't go back to the Open. He never played the Open, right? Never played the Open Championship.
No, he didn't.
Never played it. Never played the PGA.
No. He definitely didn't play the Masters.
The PGA didn't start till 1916, so he died 6 years before that. Definitely didn't play the Masters.
Right.
There was only one major for him to play in.
Yeah. Well, he would say 2.
Well, the Western, yeah. Which he won, what, 4 times? Right?
Yes.
Yeah, 4 times. So he gets no credit for this, nor does Walter Hagen. He really won 8 majors.
He won 8 majors.
And Walter Hagen really won 15.
Yeah. Yeah.
He gets no credit for it. They took him away.
Yeah. But what would be your definition of a major?
A chance to grab a little piece of immortality, that'll do it. Week in and week out, guys play for money. But majors, they play for immortality, you know, to be remembered. 100 years from now. We're sitting here talking about Willie Anderson because he won the U.S. Open. If he had won the, you know, Saratoga Open 3 years in a row, we wouldn't be standing here, you know?
The game means so much to you, and here we are standing. Nobody knows this name, Willie Anderson, anymore, but we do, you do, and we're looking at North Berwick, like, North Berwick, man, that's golf. Yeah, it is. And this guy, he's got the 4, right here in his tombstone, he's got 4 Opens listed. In '09, Anderson took a job as the head pro of the Philadelphia Cricket Club. And the reason he wanted to do it was because he wanted to get to know the golf course better, the St. Martin's course that we talked about earlier. What do you think it says about him that he wanted to come back and play that 10 Open?
It's a testament, I think, to just how golf gets in your blood, and you can't get away from it. You know, the thrill of competition, it never dies in you. His drive to compete in 1910 at 31 years of age, it's cool, but it's nothing new. I mean, everybody that plays this game at a high level thinks that they've got one more good week in them. You know, one more win. You know, it also says a lot about what the U.S. Open meant. You know, I mean, again, back then, that's before the PGA, that's before the Masters. Obviously, it's not easy to go over and play in the Open Championship then, so that was it. It meant everything, and he was, you know, by all accounts, the best player in the world. You know, the first thing that comes to mind is I wonder what he swung like. Yeah. What did it look like? Yeah. You know, we've got good records of Harry Vardon's swing. People tell you what he swung like. People even tell you what Bernard Darwin swung like. But for a guy who won 4 U.S. Opens, there's not that much written about him.
I think the reason golf traditionalists love the U.S. Open is because it's loaded with emotion under the surface, but above the surface that we can see, you've got to lock down that emotion. Here are the three that absolutely come to mind. Jack Nicklaus, Tiger Woods, and Ben Hogan have been so successful in U.S. Opens, and other great mega talents like Seve Ballesteros and Phil Mickelson have not.
When I qualified for the U.S. Open, I think I qualified for a half dozen of them. I always had two thoughts upon qualifying. You know, I was like, you know, really cool. I'd get back to the room, you know, and I'd think, tremendous sense of accomplishment. But immediately I would also have a tremendous sense of trepidation. You know, it's like, you know, you go there and you're a little off your game and you can look like a complete and utter fool.
In 1986, Brandel was just really starting his tour career, and Raymond Floyd was a magnificently large figure in the game because he was tough, because he was in your face. He wasn't scared of Nicklaus or Trevino or anybody else, but he hadn't won the one that meant the most to him, the U.S. Open. And in 86, he did win the U.S. Open, and he cried. He didn't cry like a baby, but he cried. And it was like, wow, I didn't know he had that in him. And you could just see how much the event meant to him.
What does that mean to you, the fact that Raymond cried at Shinnecock Hills?
It was a lifelong pursuit of his. You know, that was his 22nd U.S. Open, if I remember correctly. And he had played with Venturi in '64, so he had seen, you know, what it meant to Ken Venturi, how Ken wasn't going to stop, even though he was been told, you know, stop playing. He was risking his life to be out there playing, and he saw, you know, how much it meant to him. And then he had this love-hate relationship, Raymond did, with the U.S. Open, as most people do. You know, you get there, and it's unlike any other setup. You know, the PGA Tour, they run tournaments week in and week out. They set it up to get players around. And the USGA is like, no, they're not setting it up to get players around. They're setting it up to give players the most thorough test. So players just hated the setups, as Raymond did. But I think there's a reverence, a respect for U.S. Open champions that is, I think, you know, consistent with the difficulty of those golf courses. You know, I mean, the harder they are, it's like you've gone through the gauntlet and you're the one that didn't blink. But that's a great story, you know, a tournament that can make gods cry.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And tough gods. I mean,
tough, the toughest.
Raymond Floyd. Curtis won 2 straight, won 88
right
at the country club, and then he won 89 at Rochester.
Right.
And then he played well at Medina for about 60 holes, or maybe more than that.
Yeah.
And then he didn't win. Of course, Hale Irwin won in a playoff over Mike Donald. But then, have you heard this part? Driving back to Hertz, by the way, just as a starting point, driving back to Hertz. In other words, no courtesy cars. Just had a
right.
Driving back to Hertz, he felt everything washing out of him. Like all that pressure.
You win 3, 4, 5% of the time you're in the Hall of Fame. So, you know, Curtis would have spent so much energy prepping for that every U.S. Open, but in particular, the third one with a chance to tie Willie Anderson. He would have given it everything he had. He probably, I bet you, from the time he won his second one until the time he finished playing at Medina, there probably wasn't a day that went by that he didn't think about the possibility of winning 3 in a row.
Impossible.
Yeah, I mean, I bet you it didn't.
Yeah.
And all of his energy, everything went into it. I mean, just winning a major again, it gives you a permanence in the game forever, a piece of immortality. But 2 in a row put him in a very, very small club. 3 in a row would have put you in the club of only one other player.
So it was neat to have Brandel talk about Willie Anderson almost like the guy, just died a couple of years ago. That's how real Willie Anderson was to Brandel. And then from the Graveyard, we went to Merion Golf Club, which is one of the most historic courses, not just in Philadelphia, anywhere in the world.
Who did you say?
Kobe Bryant went to high school right
Kobe
here.
Bryant went to high school
Yeah.
right there?
Yeah, he went right here.
Get
And as a
outta
matter of
here.
fact, one of my first assignments for Sports Illustrated was covering Kobe when
A
he...
high school kid. You had to cover him when he was high school.
I covered him. I went into the gymnasium where he said I'm taking my talents to the NBA.
This should be called Phil's nemesis.
We're going to go right there.
Brandel, as a broadcaster and as a person, is a pathological truth teller. In 2013, Phil Mickelson already had 5 runner-up finishes in U.S. Opens. And standing on 13, this tiny little 110-yard par 3, all he's got to do is hit something on the green and either make or not make the putt. If he makes the 2, great. He's right there with Justin Rose and everybody else who's in the mix.
With that shot being slided down, I think that's how it's going to play.
And Phil being Phil, he overthought it.
Yes, it does, as long as he doesn't overwrite it.
So he's going to hood the wedge and smoke it. And it just took
He
off.
hooded the slightly loftery, more lofted
the
wedge.
more lofted wedge. He hooded it for whatever reason. The pin was much further right than that, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. What is that moment of Phil fussing with all those different wedges? What does it say to you about Phil?
Oh, I think it goes to what we were talking about earlier about Willie Anderson when you were asking me the question about why he would devote so much time and energy to trying to win the 1910 U.S. Open. It's like the things that make you great, you can't turn those off. And with Phil, for all the criticism he gets about flushing that wedge over the back of this green, I mean, he won 45 times in 6 major championships. So to what credit do you give his curiosity and the incessant nature to know everything that you need to know about this game is given to those 45 wins in 6 major championships? So if he loses one along the way, I would say it's a net huge positive. The same thing you could say about Arnold blowing a 7-shot lead in the 66 U.S. Open. You could say gave birth to the 60 U.S. Open victory where he came charging from behind. What would you rather have? The wonderful history of the charging victory and the colossal defeat. I mean, that's what sport's all about. Giving it your all, and data be damned. This era, no question, better athletes, no question, better golf. But is it more exciting golf? Because everybody has access to the same information, the same dispersion rates. Everybody's a card counter now. Right. They know where they should hit it. Less chances taken, less risk taken. It's less about winning because world ranking points have currency and open doors. FedEx Cup points have currency and open doors. It used to just be victories had currency and open doors, but that's not the case anymore. So finishing second still opens doors, more doors than it used to, because you get world ranking points and FedEx Cup points. So there's less sense of bravado in the game, and everybody's more or less being coached to the middle. I'm not criticizing it, I understand it, but I think people pay to see, stop what they're doing to watch people who dare to be different, and that's what Phil was. Look, I have my criticisms of Phil, but I'll never criticize his golf or him taking risks or him trying to outsmart the game as much as people want to criticize him for thinking he knows it all. I always found him to be very fascinating. Taking a driver out of play, you know, famously, Ben Hogan took an 8-iron out of play somewhere because there were no 8-iron shots on a golf course. Now, tell me something more arrogant than that.
Yeah.
That you think there are no 8-iron shots on a golf course, that you're going to hit it in the same spot every day, that some wind you hadn't thought of is going to blow in your face and you're going to have an 8-iron? I mean, what is more arrogant than that? Right. But as it relates to Ben, people laud it. And as it relates to Mickelson, they criticize it. Like, no, you know, I love that side of Phil, that curiosity.
How about that moment, Brandel, when he fussed with Mike Davis when he was walking off the par 3 tee? What did you think at the time?
Golfers, professional golfers, fussing with the USGA executives is nothing new and not original to Phil. Yeah. They've all had a go at him. You know, and the better you are, the more vocal you are, the more opinionated you are, the more weight you carry. And can you imagine being in charge of Winged Foot in 1974, which led to, I think, Sandy Tatum's best ever line was, "We're not trying to embarrass the best players in the world, we're simply trying to identify them." I mean, to me, that's what the USGA is renowned for, and I would say should be applauded for. The ultimate think tank, a cauldron of anxieties. That's what the U.S. Open, in my book, is and should always be, because the other majors all have their own philosophy, and so Phil fussing with it again. I mean, you can roll your eyes at Phil doing that, but that's not unique to Phil. Every single professional golfer, maybe with the exception of Nicklaus, who didn't find fault with the U.S. Opens, would have probably had a go at a... There's always this antagonistic relationship between the USGA executives and PGA Tour players. Right. Because it's like, well, who are you guys to tell us 1 week of the year how fast to play and have a golf course that's set up to expose our weaknesses? Because we're all heroes. And it's like, no, not really. Let's see who amongst you can handle the most intimidation and have the most control over your golf shots. That's what I loved about the USGA, and I loved about the U.S. Open.
And then our third U.S. Open Tour stop was Philadelphia Country Club, which people wouldn't necessarily associate with the U.S. Open. I think it's only held one U.S. Open. That was in 1939 when Byron Nelson, a fellow Texan, to Brandel, won his lone U.S. Open. We were lucky to have a great host there, a gentleman named Ed Kerr, and he knew all the shots that Byron Nelson hit down the stretch, including a 1-iron he holed in the playoff for a 2.
Oh, look, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And taking a picture or wanting to hit a shot. This is it. Look at that. Hold a 1-iron, leading to his U.S. Open victory, 1939. Beautiful piece of property.
It is spectacular. I mean, look at this elevation change.
So,
you know what it looks like? It almost looks like the Country Club when you stand right here.
It does kind of, doesn't it? Isn't it odd, though? I mean, when you look at how this is tied to the demise of Sam Snead. Isn't it funny how Sam and Phil both had huge debacles on the 18th hole to keep them from winning the U.S. Open? I mean, Phil at Winged Foot and Sam here.
Brandel talks about Snead's swing all the time. It was perfection. It was a little different. It was a little shut and a little closed in the stance, but for rhythm and for strength and repeatability, it was perfection. So just the idea that Snead had this one opportunity as a young man to win a U.S. Open and couldn't get it done, made a triple bogey on an easy par 5. You don't know then that it's going to haunt him for the rest of his life because you think you have all these other chances, but he didn't. And so all these years later, looking back at it, it's almost heartbreaking and it's almost beautiful at the same time.
I looked it up the other day. If you gave Sam, which is a huge concession, but if you gave Sam a 69 in the final round of every U.S. Open he played, how many do you think he would have won?
4, 3,
5, and he would have tied in 3 others. So he had 3 in playoffs. He'd been in a playoff in 3, and he would have won 5 right outright. So and he's shot a lot of 73s, 74s, 81 once. They were not his forte.
I bet Arnold would be about the same. What is it about this game that we're here where Snead didn't win, best chance to win the U.S. Open, made an 8, didn't win it. We're still on the same golf course. You knew Snead, you spent time with Snead. What is that? How many magical properties could one game have that would let all this sort of be in the mix at the same time?
I think that's where golf is blessed, though, because people know the game so well. You know, unlike other sports, you watch them to be entertained. You don't watch them because you're trying to get better yourself. Nobody's going to go out and try to throw the football like Tom Brady, you know, or swing a bat like Mike Trout. But you watch golf, and you think, I wonder if that'll work on. I wonder if I can do that, you know. So we watch it not just to be entertained. We watch it to get better, and then along the way, you fall in love with the lore and the history of golf courses and architecture, and then you travel and you meet friends, and the whole thing is just like this rich tapestry that I think is, you know, the greatest game ever. So we all know the stories of old Tom and Allen Robertson getting in a fight. We know the story of Bobby Jones discovering his putting stroke in the locker room at Augusta Country Club. You know, those are part of the, you know, you got to have something to talk about when you're in the sitting on the 19th hole. And if you don't know it, somebody else does, and if he doesn't know it, somebody else does, and
Right.
we all pass these stories on. It's like, it's just part of the charm of the game, isn't it? But to be here is pretty cool, you know. It's a rich part of the history of the game right here, you know. If not for, you know, if they'd had a scoreboard, imagine if they'd had a scoreboard.
Right.
CMC would, right? Entirely different. You know, they had a big board right there. It's like, all you have to do is par this par 5. You know, the greatest player ever, maybe. He's in the conversation. All you gotta do is par 5. How much simpler does it get than that?
Sleep you could do.
He makes triple bogey.
Yeah.
It doesn't even make the playoff. It's pretty cool. You know, we celebrate the heroics, but we also talk about, we don't stop talking about Arnold Palmer losing a 7-shot lead with 9 holes to go, do we? We don't stop talking about TC Chen's double chip in the U.S. Open in 1985. You don't stop talking about those things. It's a big part of the game.
What's this little U.S. Open warm-up been like for you? We know Willie Anderson, Merion, now here.
I'm lucky. I get up every single morning. I'm as excited to dig in and do the work that I do as I was to hit golf balls. So when I get to do things like this, this is the type of stuff where you're just like, I gotta be so lucky, you know, that I've found a game that I love and found a way to make a living at it long after I could play it at any high level. So it's a treat, it's a joy, it's a gift, you know. Every day to get up and have some purpose that keeps you going all day, it's a gift, you know.